The story of Jesus Christ is one that has transcended centuries, cultures, and generations. At the heart of his ministry, the miracles he performed remain among the most awe-inspiring and deeply moving aspects of his earthly mission. These miraculous acts were not mere spectacles designed to amaze or confound onlookers. They were profound revelations of a divine reality breaking into human history. Through every healing, every act of provision, every moment when the natural laws of the world were turned upside down, something far greater was being unveiled. The unmistakable presence of God's power and love working among humanity. From the earliest days of his ministry, Jesus set himself apart not simply as a wise teacher or a compassionate leader, but as one who carried with him the authority of heaven. The miracles were, in essence, signs, visible markers that pointed to a deeper spiritual truth. They were not random acts of kindness or demonstrations of power for the sake of power. Instead, they were deliberate, intentional acts, each carrying layers of meaning that touched the body, soul, and spirit. Through them, Jesus revealed his identity as the promised Messiah and the Son of God, and he gave the world a glimpse of the kingdom of heaven in action. The word miracle itself evokes a sense of wonder, something beyond ordinary experience, something that defies explanation by natural laws. Yet in the context of Jesus' ministry, miracles were not just about the miraculous event itself. They were windows into the heart of God, showcasing divine mercy, justice, and compassion. Every miracle was an invitation to faith, to transformation, and to a deeper understanding of who God is and what he desires for his creation. As Psalm 77 verse 14 says, "You are the God who performs miracles. You display your power among the peoples." This ancient acknowledgement reminds us that miracles are not isolated incidents, but part of a greater story of God's involvement in human affairs. Why is it essential to recount every miracle Jesus performed? Because each one, no matter how well-known or seemingly small, builds a fuller picture of his mission and message. To truly grasp the magnitude of what Jesus accomplished, it is necessary to look at the entirety of his works. Every healing, every exorcism, every instance of nature obeying his command contributes to a tapestry that displays the fullness of his divine authority. Without understanding the breadth of these miracles, it becomes easy to limit Jesus to one aspect of his ministry, missing the vastness of his impact. Moreover, these miracles serve as timeless testimonies. Though they happened in a specific historical and cultural context, their messages continue to resonate. They speak to the deepest human needs: healing from sickness, freedom from oppression, provision in scarcity, peace in the midst of chaos, and ultimately, victory over death itself. In recounting these stories, one cannot help but feel drawn into the narrative of hope and renewal that Jesus offers to the world. The miracles also serve another crucial function. They challenge the boundaries of what is considered possible. They confront human doubt, skepticism, and the limitations imposed by earthly understanding. Jesus' miracles invite us to look beyond what we can see and touch, and to believe in a reality where God's power is not confined by time, space, or circumstance. This is why the Gospel accounts so meticulously preserve these moments, ensuring that every generation can encounter the living testimony of God's might and compassion. In many ways, miracles are the fingerprints of God upon the earth. They leave traces that point back to a divine source, compelling those who witness or hear of them to respond. For some, the response is immediate faith. For others, it is confusion or even resistance. Yet the miracles persist, standing as undeniable markers that something extraordinary has taken place. And in doing so, they continually invite people into a relationship with the one who performed them. Recounting every miracle is not just an exercise in storytelling, it is a journey into the very heart of the gospel. It reminds us that faith is not built on abstract ideas alone, but on tangible demonstrations of God's active presence. These miracles affirm that Jesus was not only a messenger, but the very embodiment of God's love and power on earth. Each account reveals facets of his character, his compassion, his justice, his patience, and his unyielding commitment to restore and redeem. As we prepare to delve into each miraculous moment, it becomes clear that this is more than a historical review. It is an exploration of divine truth, a reawakening of faith, and an invitation to see the world through the lens of the miraculous. In witnessing the power that once shook the world, we are reminded that this same power remains alive and at work today. Psalm 145 verse 4 beautifully encapsulates this. One generation commends your works to another. They tell of your mighty acts. And so, by telling the full story of Jesus' miracles, we join in that sacred tradition, passing down the mighty acts of God to inspire and uplift hearts across time and space. Let us now open our eyes and hearts to the unfolding story of miracles, a story that forever changed the world. The scene is set in the small town of Cana, nestled in the region of Galilee, where a wedding celebration is underway. Weddings in that time and culture were monumental events, often lasting several days and involving the entire community. Joy filled the air, laughter echoed through the streets, and the tables were heavy with food and drink. Yet amid the festivities, an unexpected problem arose, a problem that threatened to cast a shadow over what was meant to be a joyful occasion. The wine had run out. In that culture, running out of wine at a wedding was more than a minor inconvenience. It was a source of deep embarrassment for the hosts. It was a sign of poor planning and, worse, a failure to uphold the deep sense of hospitality that was so highly valued. This was not just a logistical issue, it was a social crisis that could leave a lasting stain on the family's reputation. Into this moment of quiet panic stepped Mary, the mother of Jesus. Mary approached Jesus with a simple yet profound statement. "They have no more wine." Her words carried weight, not just because of the immediate concern, but because of what she knew about her son. Though Jesus had not yet performed any public miracles, Mary had pondered many things in her heart over the years. Aware of his true identity and purpose, Jesus' response, while often debated for its tone, was measured. "Woman, why do you involve me? My hour has not yet come." Yet Mary, in her deep trust, simply told the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, each capable of holding between 20 and 30 gallons. These jars were not just any containers. They were used for ceremonial washing, part of the Jewish rites of purification. Their presence at the wedding was a reminder of the Old Covenant, the practices that had long been observed to maintain ritual cleanliness. Jesus instructed the servants to fill the jars with water. They did so, filling them to the brim, leaving no room for doubt or manipulation. Then came the moment of quiet transformation. Without fanfare, without dramatic gestures, Jesus told the servants to draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. As the master tasted the water that had now become wine, he was astonished. He called the bridegroom aside and remarked, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." This was no ordinary wine. It was not simply adequate or passable, it was of the highest quality, surpassing what had been served earlier. This miracle, simple on the surface, was rich with layers of meaning. On one level, it addressed the immediate need, saving the hosts from shame and allowing the celebration to continue. But on a deeper level, it was a powerful symbol of transformation and new beginnings. The use of the purification jars was no accident. Jesus took what represented the old way, the rituals of cleansing and preparation, and filled it with something new and better. In doing so, he signaled the arrival of a new covenant, one not based on ritual alone, but on the abundant grace and joy of God's kingdom. The transformation of water into wine spoke of the fullness and richness that Jesus brings, a foretaste of the joy that would come through his ministry and ultimately his sacrifice. This first miracle was also a quiet revelation of his glory. It was not performed on a grand stage or before a massive crowd. Only a few were aware of what had truly happened, the servants, Mary, and of course his disciples. Yet it was enough to spark faith. As John's Gospel records, this miraculous sign revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. In many ways, the miracle at Cana set the tone for much of Jesus' ministry. It was an act of compassion, meeting a practical need. It was also a sign of deeper spiritual truths, pointing toward the transformative power that he alone could bring. And it was done with humility and grace, without seeking the spotlight, but leaving a lasting impact on those who witnessed it. This miracle continues to resonate because it reminds us that Jesus is present not only in moments of crisis, but also in the ordinary celebrations of life. He is able to transform lack into abundance, shame into honor, and the ordinary into the extraordinary. The wedding at Cana is more than just a story of water turned into wine. It is a testament to the new life and joy that Jesus offers to all who come to him. In reflecting on this first miraculous sign, we see the beginning of a journey that would unfold through countless other miracles, each building on the revelation of who Jesus is and what he came to accomplish. This moment at Cana was the first glimpse of divine power made manifest in a tangible way, marking the dawn of a new era of hope and redemption. Not long after the wedding in Cana, Jesus returned to the same region, where news of his miracles had already begun to spread. Word had traveled quickly, and people were eager to see and hear more from the one who had turned water into wine. In the town of Capernaum, some distance away, a royal official was facing a crisis of his own. His son was gravely ill, teetering on the edge of death. Desperation drove the official to seek out Jesus, clinging to the hope that this miracle worker might be able to save his child. The official's position was one of authority and privilege. As a royal officer, he likely had access to the best resources and physicians of the time. Yet in the face of his son's suffering, all his status and influence proved powerless. Illness is the great equalizer, reducing even the most powerful to helplessness. This man's journey to Jesus was not just a physical one, but a journey of faith, born from a place of deep need. When he found Jesus, the official did not mince words. He pleaded with him to come down to Capernaum and heal his son, who was near death. His request was direct and urgent, reflecting the raw emotion of a father's love and fear. Jesus, seeing the man's desperation, responded in a way that seemed at first unexpected. He said, "Unless you people see signs and wonders, you will never believe." This response was not a dismissal of the official's plea, but a broader observation about the nature of faith. Many were drawn to Jesus because of the miracles, seeking signs rather than genuine belief. Yet the royal official persisted, his focus unshaken by Jesus' words. He simply replied, "Sir, come down before my child dies." His plea was pure, his faith simple and resolute. In that moment, Jesus did something extraordinary. Without moving an inch, without even seeing the boy, he said to the official, "Go, your son will live." These words carried divine authority, a command that bridged distance and defied natural limitations. The official had come expecting Jesus to travel with him, to lay hands on the child, or at least be physically present. Instead, he was asked to believe in the power of Jesus' word alone. This was a pivotal test of faith. The man had a choice: to continue pleading, to insist on Jesus' physical presence, or to trust the spoken word and return home. Remarkably, he chose trust. The gospel tells us that the man took Jesus at his word and departed. This quiet act of faith, so profound in its simplicity, stands as one of the most powerful demonstrations of belief in the entire narrative. As the official was on his way back home, his servants met him with joyful news. His son was alive and well. He inquired about the exact time his child had begun to recover, and they told him it was at the very hour Jesus had declared, "Your son will live." This confirmation sealed the miracle in the official's heart, leaving no doubt about the source of the healing. The impact of this miracle extended beyond the immediate healing. The Gospel notes that the official and his entire household came to believe. One act of faith, one moment of divine intervention, rippled outward, bringing transformation not just to the sick child, but to the hearts and lives of all who were connected to him. This long-distance miracle holds profound meaning. It reveals Jesus' absolute authority over space and time, affirming that his power is not confined by physical presence. It also showcases the beauty of faith that trusts in his word, even when there is no visible proof. The royal official's journey reminds us that faith often requires stepping out in trust, holding on to God's promises, even when circumstances seem uncertain. This event also serves as a powerful testament to the nature of Jesus' mission. His miracles were not limited by geography or accessibility. His reach extended to those who sought him with sincere hearts, no matter where they were. The healing of the nobleman's son stands as a lasting example of divine authority and a call to all who believe to take Jesus at his word and trust in his power to act, even from afar. In the quiet but decisive steps of that royal official, we see a reflection of every faith journey, a movement from desperation to trust, from pleading to belief, and from doubt to assurance. This miracle continues to inspire because it speaks to the timeless truth that Jesus' word is enough and his power knows no bounds. After performing his first miracles in Cana and Capernaum, Jesus' reputation began to grow, and with it came both intrigue and controversy. One Sabbath, he entered the synagogue in Capernaum, a town that had become a significant center for his early ministry. The synagogue, a place of worship and teaching, was filled with people eager to hear from him. Unlike the religious leaders they were used to, scribes and teachers who often quoted tradition and previous authorities, Jesus spoke with a different kind of authority, one that was direct, confident, and rooted in his own divine insight. The people were astonished at his teaching. There was a power in his words, a clarity and conviction that struck them deeply. His authority was not merely about the content of his message, but about the presence he carried. It was as though the very word of God was being spoken through him, not as a distant interpretation, but as a living reality. Amid the quiet intensity of his teaching, something startling occurred. A man in the synagogue, possessed by an unclean spirit, suddenly cried out. The demon within the man recognized Jesus instantly, saying, "What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." These words were both a confession and a challenge. While many around Jesus were still piecing together his identity, the spiritual realm was under no illusion. The demons knew exactly who he was and what his presence meant, a direct threat to their dominion. Jesus' response was swift and commanding. He did not engage in a long dialogue or perform an elaborate ritual. Instead, with a simple, authoritative command, he said, "Be quiet, come out of him." The unclean spirit, convulsing the man and letting out a loud cry, obeyed and left. The entire scene unfolded with a clarity that left no doubt about the power at work. The reaction of those in the synagogue was immediate and profound. Amazement swept through the crowd, and they began to ask one another, "What is this? A new teaching, and with authority. He gives orders to impure spirits, and they obey him." Word of this event spread rapidly throughout the entire region of Galilee, marking a turning point in Jesus' public ministry. This moment in Capernaum was far more than an isolated incident of deliverance. It was a declaration of war against the forces of evil. By casting out the unclean spirit in such a public and undeniable way, Jesus signaled the arrival of God's kingdom, a kingdom that would confront and overthrow the power of darkness. His authority was not limited to human teaching or interpretation of Scripture. It extended into the spiritual realm, demonstrating mastery over forces that had long held people in bondage. The unclean spirit's recognition of Jesus also highlights a crucial truth. Spiritual clarity is often sharper than human perception. While many were still coming to understand who Jesus was, the demonic forces had no such confusion. Their reaction was one of immediate fear and submission, showing that wherever Jesus went, the dominion of evil was challenged and broken. This event also set the tone for what would become a recurring theme in Jesus' ministry: his authority over evil and his commitment to setting people free. Time and again, Jesus would encounter those oppressed by demonic forces, and each time he would bring liberation with a word of command. The synagogue in Capernaum became the first public stage for this confrontation, a moment that left an indelible mark on all who witnessed it. For the people of Capernaum, and for generations who have read this account, the casting out of the unclean spirit serves as a powerful reminder that Jesus' mission was and is one of deliverance. It affirms that no power of darkness is too great, no bondage too strong to stand against the authority of Christ. His presence brings not only truth and teaching, but real and tangible freedom. In reflecting on this miracle, it becomes clear that Jesus was not content to merely inform or inspire. He came to transform. His authority extended into every corner of human experience, including the spiritual battles that often remain hidden from view. This first dramatic confrontation in Capernaum announced that a new era had begun, one in which the kingdom of God would advance, pushing back the forces of evil and restoring wholeness to those in need. Through this powerful act, Jesus demonstrated that his words were not empty promises, but carried the full weight of divine authority, an authority that brought freedom and light into the darkest places. After the striking scene in the synagogue at Capernaum, Jesus left with his close followers and entered the home of Simon Peter. This home, simple and modest, would soon become the setting for yet another moment of divine intervention. Peter's mother-in-law was there, lying in bed with a high fever. In that time, a fever was not seen merely as a symptom, but often as a dangerous and potentially fatal condition, especially given the limited medical knowledge and resources available. The request for healing came naturally. Jesus was informed of her condition, and without hesitation he went to her bedside. What happened next was both tender and powerful. Jesus took her by the hand and helped her up, and as he did, the fever left her immediately. There was no prolonged recovery, no waiting for strength to return. In an instant, she was not only healed, but fully restored to health and vitality. In a beautiful gesture of gratitude and restored energy, she began to serve those in the house. This scene reveals much about the nature of Jesus' healing ministry. His touch was personal and compassionate, cutting through social norms and concerns about ritual purity. At a time when touching someone with a fever might have been seen as risky or even inappropriate, Jesus did not hold back. His concern was not with appearances or traditions, but with the well-being of the individual. In healing Peter's mother-in-law, he demonstrated that his care extended to both public spectacles and private, quiet moments of suffering. But this was only the beginning. Word of what had happened in the synagogue earlier that day had spread quickly throughout the town, and as evening approached, once the Sabbath restrictions had ended, people began to gather outside the house in large numbers. The street soon filled with men, women, and children, each bringing their own burdens, ailments, and afflictions. They came carrying loved ones who were sick and leading those oppressed by unclean spirits, all seeking the healing touch of Jesus. The scene that unfolded was extraordinary. One by one, Jesus healed the sick, laying his hands on each person. He also cast out many demons, freeing those who had been tormented for far too long. What stands out in this moment is the sheer scale of his compassion. No one was turned away. No affliction was too small or too great. Every individual mattered. The Gospel accounts emphasize that Jesus personally attended to each person, making his care and power felt in a deeply intimate way. This outpouring of healing was not only a physical restoration, but a profound spiritual statement. It signaled that the kingdom of God was not a distant promise, but a present reality, breaking into the lives of ordinary people. The mass healings underscored the heart of Jesus' mission to bring wholeness, freedom, and restoration wherever he went. As the night wore on, the town of Capernaum witnessed something unprecedented. Hope had come to their doorsteps, and for many, life would never be the same. What began as the quiet healing of one woman blossomed into a movement of grace and mercy that touched an entire community, leaving a lasting imprint of God's love and power. The shores of the Sea of Galilee were bustling with life. Fishermen moved about, mending their nets, cleaning their boats, and preparing for the next outing. It was an ordinary scene, one that had repeated itself countless times. Yet on this particular day, something extraordinary was about to happen, something that would forever change the lives of a few fishermen and ultimately alter the course of history. Jesus was standing by the water's edge, and as usual a crowd had gathered around him, eager to hear his words. The people pressed in so tightly that Jesus looked for a way to continue teaching without being overwhelmed. He spotted 2 boats nearby, left there by fishermen who were washing their nets after a long, unsuccessful night of work. One of the boats belonged to Simon Peter. Jesus stepped into Simon's boat and asked him to push out a little from shore. From this natural amphitheater of water and sky, Jesus taught the crowd, his voice carrying over the waves. When he had finished speaking, he turned his attention to Simon. What happened next was unexpected and deeply symbolic. Jesus said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Simon, weary from the night's efforts, responded with honesty. "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything." The exhaustion in his voice was clear, the frustration of fruitless labor weighing on him. Yet something about Jesus, his presence, his authority, stirred a response of obedience. "But because you say so, I will let down the nets." They moved out into deeper waters, and as the nets were lowered, what happened defied all logic and experience. Suddenly, the nets were so full of fish that they began to break. In a rush of urgency, Simon signaled to his partners, James and John, who were in the other boat, to come and help. Both boats were filled to the point of sinking under the sheer weight of the catch. Simon Peter's reaction was immediate and telling. Overwhelmed by the miracle, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord. I am a sinful man." His words were not a rejection of Jesus, but a recognition of divine holiness in the presence of human frailty. He understood in that moment that he was standing before someone far greater than any teacher or prophet. Jesus, full of grace, responded not with rebuke, but with an invitation. "Don't be afraid. From now on you will fish for people." With these words, the miracle of the fish took on a deeper meaning. It was no longer just about abundance in the sea, but about the new mission that lay ahead. Simon Peter, James, and John were being called to a different kind of work, to cast their nets wide and bring souls into the kingdom of God. When they returned to shore, there was no hesitation. They left everything, the boats, the nets, the record-breaking catch, and followed Jesus. The material gain they had just witnessed paled in comparison to the call they had received. What mattered now was the journey ahead, one that would lead them across Galilee, through miracles, trials, and ultimately to the very heart of God's redemptive plan. This moment by the sea was the beginning of true discipleship. It was a clear and powerful demonstration that Jesus calls people in the midst of their ordinary lives, transforming their purpose and direction. The great catch of fish was more than a miracle of provision. It was a sign of the greater work to come, where these fishermen would play a vital role in spreading the message of salvation. The encounter at the Sea of Galilee reminds us that Jesus meets us where we are, in the familiar rhythms of our daily lives, and invites us into something far greater. His call is not based on our qualifications or successes, but on his purpose and power. The obedience of Simon Peter and his companions opened the door to a new chapter, one where their lives would no longer be defined by the sea, but by the mission to bring hope and life to the world. As Jesus moved from town to town, his reputation as a healer and teacher continued to spread, drawing crowds wherever he went. Among those who sought him out was a man burdened not only by illness, but by the crushing weight of isolation and rejection. This man was afflicted with leprosy, a disease that, in the ancient world, was feared and misunderstood. Its physical toll was devastating, but perhaps even more painful was the social and emotional exile it brought. Lepers were cast out of society, required to live on the margins, away from family and community. They were obligated to announce their presence with the words, "Unclean, unclean," as a warning to others. To touch a leper was to risk ritual defilement, and so, for most, these individuals became invisible, avoided and ignored, their humanity overlooked in favor of self-preservation. Yet this man, desperate and full of faith, refused to remain hidden. Seeing Jesus, he approached him boldly, falling on his knees. His words were simple but profound. "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." In that one sentence, he acknowledged both Jesus' power and his own hope, tempered by the understanding that healing was not guaranteed, but dependent on the will of the one he addressed. The request was striking. He did not just ask to be healed, but to be made clean. This was more than a plea for physical restoration. It was a deep longing for reintegration into society, a desire to be whole in every sense, body, soul, and community. Jesus' response was immediate and filled with compassion. He did something no one else dared to do. He reached out his hand and touched the man. That touch alone was revolutionary. In the world where lepers were untouchable, Jesus shattered the barrier of fear and stigma. His touch conveyed acceptance, love, and dignity, restoring what years of isolation had stripped away. Then came the words, "I am willing. Be clean." Instantly, the leprosy left the man, and he was healed. What disease and rejection had stolen, Jesus returned in a moment, a full, miraculous cleansing that went beyond the physical. After the healing, Jesus instructed the man to show himself to the priest and offer the sacrifices commanded by Moses as a testimony to his cleansing. This was a crucial step, as it allowed the man to be officially declared clean and reintegrated into the community. Though Jesus often avoided publicity, choosing to emphasize obedience and humility, the impact of this miracle was impossible to contain. Word spread rapidly, and soon even larger crowds gathered, eager to witness and experience the power they had heard about. This encounter with the leper reveals the heart of Jesus' mission in a profound way. It shows that his healing power was not limited by fear or societal norms. He sought out the outcast, touched the untouchable, and restored those who had been left on the fringes. His miracles were acts of physical healing, yes, but they were also powerful declarations of worth, belonging, and divine love. The cleansing of the leper is a reminder that no one is beyond reach, no condition too hopeless, no barrier too high. Jesus' willingness to both touch and heal demonstrates that his compassion transcends all human boundaries, offering restoration where there once was only loss. Jesus entered Capernaum once again, the town where he had already performed remarkable miracles. This time, the request for help came from an unexpected source, a Roman centurion. As an officer in the occupying Roman army, the centurion represented a symbol of power and authority. Yet he approached Jesus not with arrogance, but with humility and deep concern. The centurion's beloved servant was gravely ill, paralyzed, and suffering terribly. Though the centurion was a man of considerable status, he recognized his own limitations. He had heard about Jesus and believed in his power, enough to seek him out, despite being a Gentile and an outsider in the Jewish community. The centurion sent elders of the Jews to Jesus, asking him to come and heal his servant. These elders spoke highly of the centurion, noting his kindness and generosity, saying, "He loves our nation and has built our synagogue." Their words reflected a man who, despite his official position, had shown respect and care for the Jewish people. As Jesus set out with them, nearing the centurion's home, a second message arrived. The centurion had sent friends to deliver these words. "Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. That is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you, but say the word, and my servant will be healed." He continued by explaining his understanding of authority. As a military officer, he knew the power of a command. Just as he gave orders, and they were carried out without question, he trusted that Jesus' word alone had the authority to heal. This expression of faith astonished Jesus. Turning to the crowd following him, Jesus said, "I tell you, I have not found such great faith even in Israel." These were remarkable words, highlighting that the centurion, a Gentile, someone outside the covenant community, had displayed a level of faith surpassing that of many within. Jesus did not need to enter the house or even lay eyes on the servant. His response was simple and powerful. "Go, let it be done just as you believed it would." The centurion's friends returned home and found the servant completely healed at that very hour, confirming the miracle. This healing stands out for several reasons. First, it demonstrates Jesus' authority over distance. Unlike many other miracles where he was physically present, here his word alone was sufficient to bring about restoration. It underscores that his power is not confined by proximity, capable of reaching across any barrier. Second, the centurion's faith shines as a profound example of trust in Jesus' authority. His humility and recognition of Jesus' sovereignty cut through cultural and religious boundaries, showing that faith is not limited by background or status. His understanding of how authority works in the natural world helped him grasp the spiritual authority Jesus carried, setting him apart as a model of true belief. Finally, this miracle opens the door to the broader message that Jesus' mission extended beyond the Jewish people. It was a glimpse of the inclusiveness of God's kingdom, a kingdom where faith, not heritage or nationality, is the defining mark of belonging. The healing of the centurion's servant reveals the boundless reach of Jesus, compassion, and the limitless power of his word. It reminds us that true faith trusts completely in his authority, even when the solution seems out of reach, and that his grace knows no borders. Jesus returned to Capernaum, and before long, word spread that he was back. The house where he was staying quickly became packed with people, so many that there was no room left, not even outside the door. The crowd gathered not only out of curiosity, but with the hope of witnessing or experiencing the miraculous. Inside the house, Jesus was teaching, his words captivating those present. Meanwhile, a group of men arrived, carrying their friend who was paralyzed. Their mission was clear: to bring their friend into Jesus' presence, believing that only he could heal him. But as they neared the house, they were met with a seemingly impossible obstacle. The crowd was so dense that they could not get close to Jesus. Their determination did not waver. Refusing to be defeated by circumstance, they came up with a bold plan. They climbed onto the roof, carrying their friend with them, and began to remove the roofing materials. Piece by piece, they opened up a space large enough to lower the paralyzed man down on his mat, right in front of Jesus. The sight must have stunned everyone in the room. The crowd, pressing in tightly just moments before, now looked up as dust and debris fell from the ceiling. And then, with precision and care, the man was lowered down, the ultimate act of faith and friendship unfolding before their eyes. Jesus' response was immediate and deeply revealing. Seeing their faith, the collective faith of the friends and the paralyzed man, he said, "Son, your sins are forgiven." This was not the expected answer. Most in the room likely anticipated a healing of the body, a restoration of the man's ability to walk. Instead, Jesus addressed a deeper need, going straight to the heart of the man's condition, his need for spiritual restoration. These words stirred the thoughts of some of the religious leaders who were present. In their hearts they questioned, "Why does this fellow talk like that? He's blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone?" Their unspoken doubts were sharp, revealing their belief that Jesus had crossed a line reserved only for God himself. Jesus, perceiving their thoughts, challenged them openly. He asked, which is easier, to say to this paralyzed man, "Your sins are forgiven," or to say, "Get up, take your mat and walk"? To demonstrate that his authority extended to both the spiritual and physical realms, Jesus turned back to the paralyzed man and said, "I tell you, get up, take your mat and go home." In that moment, the impossible became reality. The man, who had been carried in helpless and immobile, stood up in full view of everyone. He picked up his mat and walked out of the house, completely healed. The crowd was left in awe, and their response was filled with reverence and amazement. They praised God, saying, "We have never seen anything like this." This miracle did more than restore a man's physical health. It revealed the full scope of Jesus' mission to heal not just the body, but the soul. By forgiving the man's sins first, Jesus made a profound statement about what matters most. His power to heal was undeniable, but even greater was his authority to forgive, a divine prerogative that pointed unmistakably to his true identity. The determination of the friends, their unwavering faith, and the courage to break through every obstacle stand as a testament to the power of persistent belief. Their actions brought their friend into the presence of Jesus, where both his deepest and most visible needs were met. This event marks a pivotal moment in Jesus' ministry, showcasing his compassion, his authority, and his willingness to confront and correct misconceptions about God's power. It affirms that healing and forgiveness are intertwined in the heart of God's redemptive work, offering both restoration and new beginnings. It was the Sabbath, a day set apart for rest and worship, and Jesus entered the synagogue as was his custom. Among those gathered was a man whose right hand was withered, shriveled, and useless. His condition was well known to the community, a visible reminder of brokenness in a world longing for wholeness. Yet on this particular day, his presence would become the center of a significant confrontation. Also present were the religious leaders, the Pharisees and scribes, watching Jesus closely. Their intentions were not pure curiosity or a hunger for truth, but a desire to find grounds to accuse him. They knew of his reputation for healing and anticipated that he might act, even though it was the Sabbath. In their view, healing was considered work, and to perform it on the Sabbath would, in their strict interpretation of the law, be a violation. Jesus, fully aware of their thoughts and motives, did not shy away from the challenge. He called the man with the withered hand forward, bringing him into the center where everyone could see. The tension in the room grew thick. All eyes were on Jesus, waiting to see what he would do and how he would navigate the scrutiny of the religious elite. Before acting, Jesus addressed the heart of the matter with a question: which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to destroy it? His words cut through the legalistic mindset, exposing the true purpose of the Sabbath, a day meant for restoration and mercy, not for rigid rules that ignored human need. The leaders remained silent, unwilling or unable to answer. Their silence spoke volumes, revealing hearts more concerned with upholding tradition than with extending compassion. Jesus looked around at them, and the Gospel writers note that his gaze was marked by both anger and deep distress. He was grieved by their stubborn hearts, their resistance to understanding the true spirit of the law. Turning his attention back to the man, Jesus gave a simple command: "Stretch out your hand." The man obeyed, and as he did, his hand was completely restored, whole and strong once again. No physical contact was made, no elaborate ritual performed, just a word spoken, and healing flowed. The response from the religious leaders was immediate and severe. Instead of rejoicing over the miracle or acknowledging the mercy shown, they were filled with fury. They left the synagogue and began plotting how they might destroy Jesus, confirming that their primary concern was the preservation of their authority, even at the cost of truth and compassion. This moment in the synagogue highlights several crucial themes. First, it reveals Jesus' unwavering commitment to compassion. He placed human need above ritualistic observance, demonstrating that mercy is always in line with God's heart, even when it clashes with human traditions. His willingness to heal, despite knowing it would provoke hostility, shows his courage and clarity of purpose. Second, the healing exposes the deep divide between Jesus and the religious authorities. Their fixation on rules had blinded them to the very essence of the law they claimed to uphold. In their zeal to maintain control, they missed the arrival of the one who fulfilled the law with grace and truth. Finally, the healing of the man with the withered hand serves as a powerful testimony that God's work is not confined by human-made boundaries. The Sabbath, far from being a day of restriction, is a day of liberation, a reminder that God's rest includes restoration and wholeness. Jesus' actions on that day reaffirmed that the kingdom of God is about bringing life, even when doing so challenges the status quo. In restoring the man's hand, Jesus not only brought healing to his physical body, but also made a public declaration of what true righteousness looks like, a righteousness that is inseparable from mercy and compassion. Jesus, followed by his disciples and a large crowd, approached the small town of Nain. The atmosphere was vibrant with anticipation as people gathered around him, eager to witness more of his teachings and miracles. But as they neared the town gate, the mood shifted dramatically. They encountered another crowd, this one wrapped in sorrow and mourning. A funeral procession was making its way out of the town. At its center was a grieving widow, walking behind the bier that carried her only son. In that culture, her situation was heartbreaking on multiple levels. She had already lost her husband, and now her only son. Her last source of protection, provision, and family was gone. Without a male relative, her future was bleak. She faced not only deep personal loss, but also social and economic vulnerability, left entirely alone in the world. Jesus saw her, and something powerful happened. He was moved with compassion, not the distant sympathy of an observer, but a deep, visceral response to her pain. He approached the woman and spoke gently to her, saying, "Do not weep." These words, tender and full of hope, were not an empty consolation. They were a prelude to something no one present could have imagined. Jesus then stepped forward and touched the bier. This action alone was shocking. According to Jewish law, touching a dead body, or even the platform carrying it, rendered a person ceremonially unclean. But Jesus was not bound by such fears. His touch did not make him unclean. Rather, his power brought life where there had been only death. With the crowd standing in stunned silence, Jesus spoke directly to the lifeless body. "Young man, I say to you, arise." At his word, the dead man sat up and began to speak. The once silent body was now animated with life, and Jesus gave him back to his mother, restoring not just a son to his mother, but a future to a family and hope to a broken heart. A wave of awe swept through the people. Fear and wonder mingled as they praised God, saying, "A great prophet has appeared among us, and God has come to help his people." News of this miracle spread quickly throughout Judea and the surrounding countryside, carried by the lips of witnesses who had seen death itself defeated. This miracle at Nain is deeply significant. It is the first recorded instance in the Gospels of Jesus raising someone from the dead, signaling his power over the ultimate enemy, death. But it is also a testament to his heart. Jesus did not perform this miracle because someone asked him to. Unlike many other healings, there was no plea for help, no desperate request. He acted purely out of compassion, moved by the sight of a mother's unbearable grief. The raising of the widow's son stands as a vivid demonstration that Jesus' mission encompasses both the spiritual and the physical realms. His authority extends beyond illness and oppression to life itself. In this act, he revealed that God's mercy is not distant or detached, but intimately involved in the pain and suffering of his people. This moment at Nain shows that Jesus sees those who are broken-hearted and acts decisively to bring restoration. His power to bring life is matched by his deep empathy, a combination that speaks to both his divinity and his humanity. Through this miracle, Jesus not only reversed death, but also restored dignity and hope, offering a glimpse of the ultimate victory that would later be fully realized in his own resurrection. After a long day of teaching the crowds, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side of the lake." They set out, leaving behind the familiar shores, and boarded a boat to cross the Sea of Galilee. The disciples, many of whom were experienced fishermen, were well acquainted with the waters. Yet even their skills and knowledge would soon be put to the test in a way they could not have foreseen. As the boat moved across the lake, Jesus, physically exhausted from his ministry, lay down and fell asleep on a cushion in the stern. The sea, usually calm, suddenly turned violent. A fierce storm swept down upon them, with howling winds and towering waves that began to swamp the boat. The disciples fought desperately to keep the vessel afloat, but the storm's intensity overwhelmed them. Panic gripped their hearts. Despite their experience on the water, the situation had spiraled beyond their control. The boat was taking on water rapidly, and it seemed certain that they would drown. Amid the chaos, Jesus remained asleep, undisturbed by the raging wind and crashing waves. In their desperation, the disciples woke him, crying out, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Their words revealed both their fear and their confusion. They had witnessed Jesus' power in healing the sick and casting out demons, but now, faced with the raw force of nature, they struggled to believe that help was possible, even from him. Jesus rose and faced the storm. Without hesitation, he rebuked the wind and spoke to the waves, saying, "Quiet, be still." Instantly, the wind died down, and the sea became completely calm. The transformation was immediate and total. A scene of chaos turned into perfect peace by the power of his word alone. Turning to his disciples, Jesus asked, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" His questions pierced deeply, exposing the gap between what they had seen him do and what they truly believed about his authority. The disciples were left stunned, filled with awe and fear. They asked one another, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." This moment brought them face to face with a truth they were only beginning to grasp. Jesus was not merely a healer or a teacher. He commanded the forces of nature itself. His dominion extended beyond the physical and the spiritual. It embraced the natural world, leaving no doubt about his divine identity. The calming of the storm was a powerful revelation. It showed that Jesus is Lord not only over sickness and sin, but also over creation. In a world where nature's fury can feel uncontrollable and terrifying, this miracle stands as a testament to the ultimate sovereignty of Christ. His words, simple yet authoritative, remind us that there is no force too great, no storm too fierce that lies beyond his command. For the disciples, and for all who read this account, the event on the Sea of Galilee challenges every heart to trust more deeply. It reveals that fear is often rooted in a limited understanding of who Jesus truly is, and it assures us that in every storm, whether literal or metaphorical, his presence is not only a source of comfort, but a guarantee of ultimate peace. After crossing the lake, Jesus and his disciples arrived in the region of the Gerasenes, a place known for its rugged landscape and distant location from the Jewish heartlands. As soon as Jesus stepped out of the boat, he was met by a man who embodied pure torment. This man was possessed by an unclean spirit, and his condition had left him utterly broken, both physically and spiritually. The descriptions of his life are stark and haunting. He lived among the tombs, isolated from society, driven away by his own people because of the uncontrollable violence he exhibited. Often, he had been bound with chains and shackles, but no human effort could contain him. He broke free every time, his strength amplified by the demonic forces within. Day and night, he roamed the hills and tombs, crying out and cutting himself with stones. His existence was a picture of despair, his humanity almost completely consumed by darkness. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran toward him and fell on his knees. The demons, speaking through the man, cried out, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." There was no confusion about who Jesus was. The spiritual realm recognized his authority instantly. Jesus had already begun to command the impure spirit to come out of the man, initiating a confrontation that was both intense and revealing. Jesus asked, "What is your name?" The answer came, "My name is Legion, for we are many." This response unveiled the extent of the man's torment. He was not possessed by a single spirit, but by a multitude, a legion, echoing the Roman military term for thousands of soldiers. The demons begged Jesus repeatedly not to send them out of the region. They noticed a large herd of pigs feeding nearby and pleaded, "Send us among the pigs, allow us to go into them." Jesus granted their request, and as he commanded, the demons left the man and entered the pigs. Instantly, the entire herd, about 2,000 pigs, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and drowned. The herdsmen, witnessing this dramatic scene, fled in fear and ran to the nearby town to report everything. People from the town came out to see for themselves what had happened. What they found astonished them. The man who had been possessed, the one they had feared and avoided, was now sitting calmly, dressed, and in his right mind. The transformation was undeniable. A man once enslaved by darkness, now restored to full humanity. Yet, rather than rejoicing, the townspeople were overcome with fear. The sheer power displayed unsettled them, and they pleaded with Jesus to leave their region. As Jesus prepared to depart, the man who had been healed begged to go with him. But Jesus had a different mission for him. He said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." The man obeyed, going throughout the region of the Decapolis to share his story, and everyone who heard was amazed. This miracle highlights Jesus' absolute authority over the forces of evil. No matter how deep the darkness or how many the demons, his power was and is greater. The story also underscores Jesus' deep compassion. Where others saw a lost cause, Jesus saw a man worth saving, restoring not only his mind and body, but his place in the community. The reaction of the townspeople reveals a profound truth about human nature. Sometimes the power of God can be so overwhelming, so disruptive to the normal order of things, that it provokes fear rather than celebration. Yet in the man who was healed, we see the proper response, gratitude, transformation, and a willingness to testify. This miracle serves as a vivid reminder that no situation is too desperate, no person too far gone for Jesus to redeem. His mission reaches into the darkest places, and his authority brings freedom where there was once only bondage. Jesus had just returned from the region of the Gerasenes when a large crowd gathered around him once again, pressing in from every side. In the midst of this throng came Jairus, a synagogue leader, a man of prominence and respect in the community. His appearance was marked not by authority, but by desperation. Falling at Jesus' feet, Jairus pleaded earnestly, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." Jesus, moved by the urgency and the father's deep sorrow, agreed and began making his way toward Jairus' home. The crowd followed, eager and expectant, closing in on all sides. But as they moved, a quiet but equally desperate figure emerged. A woman who had been suffering for 12 long years with a condition that caused constant bleeding. Her illness was not only physically draining, but carried severe social and religious consequences. According to the law, she was considered unclean, and everything and everyone she touched became unclean as well. This meant she lived in isolation, cut off from normal social and religious life. She had spent all she had on doctors, but instead of improving, her condition had only worsened. Despite the barriers, her faith propelled her forward. She thought, "If I just touch his clothes, I will be healed." Unnoticed by the crowd, she edged closer, and with trembling hope, she reached out and touched the hem of Jesus' garment. The moment her fingers made contact, something miraculous happened. Instantly, she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. But she was not the only one who noticed. Jesus, sensing that power had gone out from him, stopped and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" His disciples were baffled. Surrounded by a crushing crowd, they questioned how he could ask such a thing. But Jesus persisted, scanning the faces until the woman, knowing she could not remain hidden, came forward. Trembling with fear and awe, she fell at his feet and told him the whole truth. Jesus' response was full of grace and reassurance. "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." His words affirmed her healing, but also restored her publicly, ensuring that everyone knew she was now clean and whole, no longer an outcast. While he was still speaking, messengers arrived from Jairus' home with devastating news. "Your daughter is dead. Why bother the teacher anymore?" The weight of those words must have been crushing, hope slipping away in an instant. But Jesus, turning to Jairus, said firmly, "Don't be afraid, just believe." They continued to the house, where a commotion had already begun. Mourners were weeping and wailing, the sound of grief filling the air. Jesus entered and said, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead but asleep." The mourners laughed at him, their sorrow turning to scorn, unable to comprehend what he meant. Jesus put them all out, taking only the child's parents and his closest disciples, Peter, James, and John, into the room where the little girl lay. He approached her, took her by the hand, and spoke with tender authority. "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately, the 12-year-old girl stood up and began to walk around. Her parents were overwhelmed with amazement, speechless in the face of this miracle. Jesus instructed them to give her something to eat, grounding the miraculous moment in a simple act of care. He also charged them to keep what had happened quiet, though news of it would inevitably spread. These intertwined miracles reveal the breadth and depth of Jesus' power. In one, a woman's chronic suffering was ended through a quiet act of faith. In the other, death itself was overturned by a word of command. Both demonstrate not only his authority over sickness and death, but also his deep personal care for individuals, regardless of their status or condition. The faith of Jairus and the woman, though expressed differently, was met with the same life-giving power. Together, their stories testify that no situation is too hopeless and no delay too long for Jesus to bring restoration. His power brings healing in ways seen and unseen, and his compassion meets each person exactly where they are, offering new life and renewed hope. As Jesus continued his journey, two blind men began following him, crying out with urgency and faith, "Son of David, have mercy on us." Their plea was both a recognition of their need and an acknowledgement of who Jesus was. By calling him Son of David, they were identifying him as the promised Messiah, the one foretold in the Scriptures to bring deliverance and healing. Despite their physical blindness, these men had a vision of faith that saw what many with sight could not yet fully grasp. They followed Jesus persistently, making their way to the house where he was staying, determined not to let the opportunity pass them by. When they finally reached him inside, Jesus turned to them and asked a simple but piercing question: "Do you believe that I am able to do this?" Their answer was immediate and unwavering. "Yes, Lord." With that confession of faith, Jesus touched their eyes and said, "According to your faith, let it be done to you." Instantly their sight was restored. The darkness that had cloaked their world was replaced by the light of new vision, a miracle both physical and spiritual. Jesus then gave them a stern warning: "See that no one knows about this." Yet, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had happened, the men could not keep it to themselves. They went out and spread the news throughout the surrounding area, sharing their testimony of healing. Even as they were leaving, another need arose. Some people brought to Jesus a man who was mute because of a demon. This man, silenced by a power beyond his control, was trapped in isolation, unable to express his thoughts or needs. Without fanfare, Jesus drove out the demon, and the man immediately began to speak. The crowd, witnessing this, was amazed and said, "Nothing like this has ever been seen in Israel." However, not everyone responded with wonder. The Pharisees, determined to undermine Jesus' growing influence, accused him of casting out demons by the power of the Prince of Demons. Their hardness of heart stood in stark contrast to the faith of those who sought Jesus out, revealing a deep spiritual blindness even greater than physical blindness. These miracles, performed in quick succession, highlight the multifaceted nature of Jesus' healing power. He restored sight to those in darkness, gave voice to the silenced, and confronted the forces of evil head-on. His compassion reached every kind of suffering, whether caused by physical ailment, spiritual oppression, or societal rejection. The healing of the two blind men and the mute demoniac together illustrate that Jesus' mission was not limited to a single aspect of human brokenness. His authority embraced the full spectrum of need, and his power brought comprehensive restoration. Each act of healing testified to his identity as the Messiah, offering proof that the kingdom of God was present and active among them. Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals, and near the sheep gate was a pool called Bethesda, surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. This place had become a gathering spot for many who were sick, blind, lame, or paralyzed, people desperate for healing. According to tradition, the waters of the pool would occasionally be stirred, and it was believed that the first person to enter the water after this stirring would be healed. Among the many lying there was a man who had been disabled for 38 years. His condition was long-standing and well-known, marking him as someone who had endured decades of disappointment and suffering. His life had been shaped by waiting, hoping for a chance at healing, yet never able to reach the water in time. Jesus noticed him lying there and, knowing the long history of his struggle, approached with a question that seemed simple but went straight to the heart. "Do you want to get well?" At first glance, the answer might seem obvious, but Jesus' question touched deeper than mere physical healing. It was an invitation for the man to engage his will, to express a desire for change and restoration. The man replied, "Sir, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." His response revealed a lifetime of frustration, shaped by isolation and helplessness. He had been so focused on the pool, on the method he believed was necessary for healing, that he did not yet realize that true healing stood before him. Without further delay, Jesus spoke a command that cut through the years of waiting. "Get up, pick up your mat and walk." Instantly, strength returned to the man's body. After nearly 4 decades of immobility, he stood up, picked up his mat, and walked away, fully restored. The miracle was undeniable, but it also stirred immediate controversy. The day was the Sabbath, and the religious leaders, rather than rejoicing over the healing, focused on the perceived violation of their rules. They told the man, "It is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat." Their rigid interpretation of the law blinded them to the miracle that had just taken place. The healed man, still amazed by what had happened, explained that the one who had made him well had told him to pick up his mat and walk. When they asked who it was, he could not answer, as Jesus had slipped away into the crowd. Later, Jesus found the man at the temple and spoke to him again, saying, "See, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you." These words reminded the man, and all who would later read this account, that Jesus' healing was concerned with more than just physical restoration. His mission was to bring wholeness to the entire person, addressing both body and soul. The man then went and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who had healed him, setting the stage for increasing tension between Jesus and the religious authorities. This miracle at the pool of Bethesda reveals Jesus' deep insight into human hearts and needs. He saw past the surface, understanding the full weight of suffering and the barriers, both physical and spiritual, that kept people bound. His healing was immediate and complete, unshackled from tradition and human expectation. It also underscored Jesus' willingness to challenge the prevailing religious norms of his time. By healing on the Sabbath and commanding the man to carry his mat, Jesus redefined what true obedience to God looked like, one rooted in mercy, restoration, and life, not in legalistic adherence to rules. The healing at Bethesda stands as a powerful testament to Jesus' authority and compassion. It shows that no matter how long the wait, no matter how deep the despair, restoration is possible when we encounter the one who holds true healing in his hands. The scene began with Jesus seeking a moment of solitude. After hearing of John the Baptist's death, he withdrew by boat with his disciples to a remote place. Yet solitude was hard to find. The people, desperate for his presence and teaching, followed on foot from the surrounding towns. When Jesus arrived at the shore, he saw a vast crowd already waiting. Instead of frustration, Jesus' heart was filled with compassion. He saw the people not as a burden, but as sheep without a shepherd, lost, hungry, and in need of guidance and care. He welcomed them, healing the sick and teaching them about the kingdom of God. Time slipped by, and as the day drew to a close, the disciples approached with a practical concern. They were in a remote place, and it was getting late. They suggested sending the people away to find food in the nearby villages. Jesus' reply caught them off guard. "You give them something to eat." The disciples, looking at the size of the crowd, about 5,000 men, not counting women and children, were bewildered. Philip remarked that even 8 months' wages would not be enough to buy bread for each person to have just a bite. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, pointed out a small offering. "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will they go among so many?" It seemed insignificant, almost laughably small, in the face of such overwhelming need. Yet Jesus saw something different. He instructed the crowd to sit down in groups on the green grass, organizing the multitude with care and order. Taking the 5 loaves and 2 fish, he looked up to heaven, gave thanks, and began to break the bread. He handed the pieces to his disciples, who then distributed them to the people. What followed was a miracle of abundance. As the bread and fish were passed around, they did not run out. Everyone ate as much as they wanted, fully satisfied. When the meal was over, Jesus told his disciples to gather the leftovers so that nothing would be wasted. They filled 12 baskets with the fragments, far more than what they had started with. The crowd, witnessing this astonishing act, was amazed. They began to murmur among themselves, saying, "Surely this is the prophet who is to come into the world." The miracle sparked a wave of excitement and hope, so much so that some wanted to take Jesus by force and make him king. This miracle holds deep layers of meaning. On the surface, it addressed an immediate physical need, feeding a hungry crowd. But beneath that was a rich tapestry of spiritual symbolism. The multiplication of bread pointed to Jesus as the true bread of life, the one who satisfies not just physical hunger, but the deepest spiritual longings of the human heart. It also demonstrated the principle that what seems small and insignificant, when placed in Jesus' hands, can be multiplied beyond imagination. The boys' simple offering, insufficient by human standards, became the foundation for a miracle that nourished thousands. The 12 baskets of leftovers carried their own message. God's provision is not just enough, it is overflowing. His abundance meets needs fully and then goes beyond, a reflection of divine generosity. This event also revealed Jesus' deep care and compassion. He saw the crowd's hunger, both physical and spiritual, and responded with tangible action. His miracle affirmed that God is intimately concerned with every aspect of human life, from the most pressing bodily needs to the eternal hunger of the soul. The feeding of the 5,000 stands as one of the most iconic moments in Jesus' ministry, a vivid demonstration that with him, nothing is impossible. It reassures all who hear the story that God's provision, when trusted and placed in his hands, will always be more than enough. After the miraculous feeding of the 5,000, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and head toward Bethsaida, while he dismissed the crowd. Once the people had departed, Jesus withdrew alone to a mountainside to pray. Evening came, and the boat with the disciples was far out on the lake. The Sea of Galilee, known for its sudden storms, became rough as strong winds arose, and waves battered the vessel. The disciples, experienced though they were with the sea, found themselves struggling against the wind and the waves. They rowed hard through the night, but progress was slow and exhausting. The darkness, the storm, and their isolation combined to create a scene of fear and uncertainty. In the quiet of the early morning, sometime between 3 and 6 o'clock, something extraordinary happened. Jesus came toward them, walking on the water. The surface of the lake, so fierce and threatening, became his path. The disciples saw him approaching but did not recognize him. Terrified, they cried out, thinking they were seeing a ghost. Immediately Jesus spoke to them, his voice cutting through their fear. "Take courage, it is I. Do not be afraid." His words were simple yet full of power, offering reassurance in the face of the unknown. Peter, ever bold and impulsive, responded, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water." Jesus answered, "Come." With that, Peter stepped out of the boat and, for a moment, did the impossible. He walked on water toward Jesus. But as he noticed the strength of the wind, fear crept back into his heart, and he began to sink. Desperate, he cried out, "Lord, save me!" Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" Together, they climbed back into the boat, and the wind died down completely. The sea, moments before wild and chaotic, was now calm and still. The disciples, witnessing this display of divine power, were overwhelmed. They worshipped Jesus, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." Their awe was a response not only to the miracle of walking on water, but also to the way Jesus brought peace to the storm, showing once again his complete mastery over nature. This event was more than a demonstration of supernatural ability. It was a profound lesson in faith. The disciples learned that Jesus is present even in the midst of the storm, and that fear often blinds us to his nearness and power. Peter's brief journey on the water illustrates both the potential of faith and the danger of doubt. When his eyes were fixed on Jesus, he did the impossible, but when fear distracted him, he faltered. The miracle also echoes earlier moments, like the calming of the storm, reinforcing that Jesus' authority extends over every element of creation. His words, his presence, and his power reassure those who follow him that no matter how fierce the storms of life may become, he is Lord over all. The story of Jesus walking on water continues to inspire because it touches on universal human experiences, fear, faith, and the longing for assurance. It shows that in the darkest, most turbulent moments, Jesus comes close, offering not only his help, but also an invitation to trust more deeply. His words, "Do not be afraid," ring out across time, reminding all who hear them that he is near, and with him there is always hope and peace. After the miraculous events on the sea, Jesus and his disciples landed at Gennesaret, a fertile plain by the Sea of Galilee. As soon as they stepped ashore, word spread quickly through the region that Jesus had arrived. The response was immediate and fervent. People ran throughout the countryside, bringing the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was. The entire region mobilized, driven by hope and faith. Wherever Jesus went, villages, towns, or the open countryside, crowds gathered, carrying those in need of healing. They laid the sick in the marketplaces, the centers of daily life, transforming these familiar spaces into places of divine encounter. The faith of the people was striking. They did not ask for elaborate rituals or prolonged attention. Instead, they begged simply to touch the fringe of his cloak, convinced that even the slightest contact with him could bring healing. Their belief echoed the faith of the woman who had been healed from her issue of blood, trusting that Jesus' power could be accessed through humble, desperate faith. And their faith was not disappointed. As the Gospels record, all who touched him were healed. Every single person who reached out found restoration, no matter their condition or status. The healing power that flowed from Jesus was not limited by number or place. It was abundant, available to all who sought him with faith. This mass outpouring of healing in Gennesaret reveals the deep hunger of the people and the overflowing compassion of Jesus. It shows how his presence transformed ordinary locations into sacred spaces, where suffering met mercy and brokenness was made whole. The simplicity of these healings is also significant. No long conversations or dramatic displays were needed. A touch, a moment of connection was enough. This underscores a profound truth. The power of Jesus is not distant or complicated to access. It is near, responsive, and generous, meeting people exactly where they are. The scene at Gennesaret stands as a powerful reminder of the accessibility of God's grace. It affirms that healing and restoration are not reserved for a select few, but are open to all who come in faith. In these quiet yet profound moments, the depth of Jesus' love and the reach of his power are on full display, offering hope and life to every outstretched hand. Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon, areas outside the traditional boundaries of Israel, marking a rare venture into predominantly Gentile territory. In this foreign land, a Canaanite woman came to him, her heart heavy with desperation. Her daughter was possessed by an unclean spirit, tormented in ways that no human effort could relieve. The woman cried out to Jesus, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is demon-possessed and suffering terribly." Her plea was urgent, and her words acknowledged Jesus not only as a healer, but as the Messiah of Israel, a remarkable confession coming from someone outside the Jewish faith. At first, Jesus did not respond. His silence seemed puzzling, and the disciples, growing uncomfortable with the scene, urged him to send her away. But the woman was not deterred. She persisted, driven by a mother's love and a deep conviction that Jesus held the answer to her suffering. Jesus finally spoke, saying, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel." His words reflected the primary focus of his earthly ministry, which was directed toward the people of Israel. Yet the woman came closer, knelt before him, and said simply, "Lord, help me." He replied, "It is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." These words, though they may sound harsh, were a reflection of the prevailing cultural view at the time, where Jews often referred to Gentiles as outsiders. But the woman's response was full of humility, faith, and wit. "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Her reply was extraordinary. She accepted her outsider status, but expressed unwavering belief that even a small measure of Jesus' power was enough to bring healing. Her faith was persistent, bold, and completely trusting in his mercy. Jesus was moved by her words. He said, "Woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted." At that very moment, her daughter was healed, freed from the torment that had gripped her for so long. This encounter reveals several profound truths. First, it underscores that faith is not limited by heritage or nationality. The woman, though a Gentile and a Canaanite, historically enemies of Israel, displayed a level of faith that surpassed many within Israel itself. Her determination and humility opened the door to the miracle she sought. Second, the story highlights Jesus' growing revelation that his mission, though first directed to Israel, would ultimately extend to all people. The healing of the Canaanite woman's daughter serves as a glimpse of the inclusiveness of God's kingdom, where faith, not background, is the true marker of belonging. Finally, this miracle stands as a testament to the power of persistent faith. The woman's refusal to be turned away, her willingness to press in despite silence and apparent rejection, shows a faith that would not let go until it received an answer. Her story continues to inspire, reminding all who seek Jesus that his mercy is wide, his power is limitless, and his heart is open to every person who comes in faith. Jesus continued his journey, moving through the region of the Decapolis, a largely Gentile area. There, people brought to him a man who was deaf and could hardly speak. His condition isolated him from the world around him, cutting him off from the basic human joys of conversation, music, and social connection. Those who brought him begged Jesus to place his hand on the man, holding on to hope that his touch could bring healing. Jesus responded in a way that highlighted both his compassion and his attentiveness to individual needs. Rather than performing the miracle in front of the crowd, he took the man aside, away from the public gaze. This private setting spoke volumes about Jesus' respect for personal dignity, ensuring that the healing would be intimate and deeply personal rather than a spectacle. Once they were alone, Jesus used physical gestures that the man could understand. He put his fingers into the man's ears, then spit and touched the man's tongue. These actions, though simple, were rich in meaning. For someone who could not hear or speak, these tactile signs conveyed Jesus' intention clearly, a direct and personal communication of what was about to happen. Jesus then looked up to heaven and gave a deep sigh, expressing both dependence on the Father and a profound empathy for human suffering. He spoke a single word, Ephphatha, which means, "be opened." Immediately the man's ears were opened, his tongue was loosened, and he began to speak plainly. The transformation was complete and undeniable. No longer trapped in silence, the man could now hear and communicate freely, rejoining the flow of life and relationship from which he had been cut off. Despite instructing the people not to tell anyone, the more Jesus asked for silence, the more the news spread. Overwhelmed with amazement, the people declared, "He has done everything well. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak." This miracle is a vivid demonstration of Jesus' personal approach to healing. He did not merely perform wonders from a distance or in impersonal ways. Instead, he engaged directly, communicating in ways that touched not only the body, but also the heart. His sigh, his touch, and his word all worked together to restore the man fully. It also highlights the fulfillment of prophetic hope. Isaiah had spoken of a time when the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped, and the tongue of the mute shall sing for joy. In this moment, those ancient promises came alive, confirming that in Jesus, the long-awaited restoration was unfolding. The healing of the deaf and mute man offers a powerful reminder that Jesus meets each person in their specific place of need. His power to heal is matched by his personal care, ensuring that every encounter with him is both transformative and deeply human. Through this act, Jesus showed that he does all things well, bringing wholeness, dignity, and new life to those who seek him. Once again, large crowds gathered around Jesus, this time in a remote area where he had been teaching and healing for several days. The people had followed him from far and wide, drawn by his words and the hope of healing. For 3 days they stayed with him, captivated by his presence, even though it meant being away from their homes and basic necessities. As Jesus looked out over the multitude, his heart was moved with compassion. He turned to his disciples and said, "I have compassion for these people. They have already been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. I do not want to send them away hungry, or they may collapse on the way." His concern was not only for their spiritual nourishment, but also for their physical well-being. The disciples, still grappling with the memory of the earlier feeding of the 5,000, responded with uncertainty. "Where could we get enough bread in this remote place to feed such a crowd?" Their question reflected a common human tendency, to forget past miracles when faced with new challenges, even when the answer stood before them. Jesus asked, "How many loaves do you have?" They replied, 7 and a few small fish. Once again, the offering seemed small compared to the need, yet Jesus saw it as enough. He instructed the crowd to sit down on the ground. Taking the 7 loaves and the fish, he gave thanks, broke them, and handed them to his disciples to distribute to the people. As before, a miracle of multiplication unfolded in their hands. Everyone ate and was satisfied, and afterward the disciples collected 7 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. This time, the number fed was about 4,000 men, besides women and children. After the meal, Jesus sent the crowd away, and he and his disciples got into the boat to continue their journey. Though similar in pattern to the feeding of the 5,000, this miracle holds its own unique significance. First, it took place in a predominantly Gentile region, suggesting that Jesus' compassion and provision were not confined to one group of people, but extended universally. The number 7, both in the loaves and in the baskets of leftovers, carries symbolic weight, often representing completeness or wholeness, a fitting reflection of Jesus' all-encompassing care. The repetition of a mass feeding also served to reinforce a crucial lesson for the disciples and all who would hear the story. God's provision is not a one-time event, but a continual reality. Each new need is met with fresh grace, and every act of faith opens the door to his abundance. This miracle also demonstrated that no situation is too barren or remote for God's provision to reach. In a place where resources were scarce and the surroundings inhospitable, Jesus created a feast, showing that his ability to provide is not limited by circumstances. The feeding of the 4,000 is a testament to Jesus' deep compassion and his power to satisfy both body and soul. It reminds us that in him there is always enough, more than enough, to meet every need, no matter how great or how often it arises. His care is ongoing, his provision endless, and his invitation to trust remains open to all. Jesus and his disciples came to Bethsaida, a town that had already witnessed many of his works. Some people brought a blind man to him, pleading for healing. Their faith was clear. They believed Jesus had the power to restore sight. But what followed was a healing unlike any other recorded in the Gospels. Taking the man by the hand, Jesus led him out of the village. This private setting, away from the crowd, signaled that the miracle would be personal and intimate, not performed for public display. Jesus' approach reflected his deep respect for the individual, offering focused care without the distraction of spectators. Once outside the village, Jesus spit on the man's eyes and placed his hands on him. Then he asked, "Do you see anything?" The man looked up and said, "I see people. They look like trees walking around." His answer revealed that his sight had begun to return, but it was still unclear and incomplete, a partial healing that left room for more. Jesus placed his hands on the man's eyes once again. This time, his vision was fully restored. He saw everything clearly, his sight sharpened and whole. Jesus then sent him home with a simple instruction: don't even go into the village. This healing stands out because it unfolded in stages, unlike the instantaneous miracles often described in the Gospels. The gradual restoration of the blind man's sight offers a glimpse into the varied ways God's healing can work. Sometimes healing is immediate, other times it comes step by step, each moment building upon the last until full restoration is achieved. The setting outside the village also holds meaning. Bethsaida, despite witnessing many of Jesus' miracles, was later rebuked by him for its lack of faith and repentance. By leading the man away from the village, Jesus may have been making a quiet statement about the need for personal faith, separate from the collective disbelief of a community. This miracle also illustrates that Jesus meets people exactly where they are. He tailored his healing approach to fit the blind man's specific need, showing that there is no single formula for how God works. Each act of healing is personal, intentional, and crafted with care. The gradual healing at Bethsaida reminds us that God's timing and methods may not always align with our expectations. Yet, whether healing comes in an instant or unfolds over time, the result is the same: restoration and clarity through the compassionate touch of Christ. His power is steadfast, his attention personal, and his desire always to bring wholeness to those who seek him. As Jesus passed by, he saw a man who had been blind from birth. His disciples, noticing the man's condition, asked a question that reflected a common belief of the time: "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Their inquiry revealed the assumption that suffering and disability were always the result of personal or inherited sin. Jesus' response cut through that belief with clarity. Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. With these words, he shifted the focus away from blame and punishment to a larger purpose, the revealing of God's glory and compassion through acts of healing and restoration. Jesus then made it clear that his mission was urgent and time-sensitive. "As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." His words pointed to the limited window of his earthly ministry and the need to bring light into the darkness, both physically and spiritually. What followed was a healing unlike any other. Jesus spat on the ground, made mud with the saliva, and applied it to the man's eyes. He then told him, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam." The man obeyed, making his way to the pool and washing his eyes. As he did, his world transformed. He came back seeing for the first time in his life. The change was so dramatic that people who had known him as a blind beggar struggled to recognize him. Some insisted it was the same man, others doubted, thinking it only looked like him. But he confirmed it boldly, "I am the man." When asked how his sight was restored, he simply recounted the events. "The man they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash, so I went and washed, and then I could see." The healing sparked immediate curiosity and debate. Those who heard the story wanted to know where Jesus was, but the man did not know. This miracle would soon ignite deeper theological discussions as the religious leaders grappled with its implications, particularly because it had been performed on the Sabbath. Beyond the physical healing, this event carried profound spiritual symbolism. The man's blindness from birth represented humanity's natural state, unable to see the truth of God on their own. Jesus, the light of the world, not only restored physical sight, but also pointed to the deeper need for spiritual awakening and clarity. The process of healing, the use of mud and water, also echoed themes of creation and renewal. Just as God formed humanity from the dust of the earth, Jesus used the earth's elements to restore sight, signifying his divine authority to bring new life. The story of the man born blind is a powerful reminder that God's works often defy human expectations and challenge prevailing assumptions. It shows that suffering is not always a sign of punishment, but can become an opportunity for God's glory to shine forth. Through this miracle, Jesus revealed his power to give both physical and spiritual sight, offering light to all who live in darkness and seek his truth. As Jesus came down from the mountain, where moments before he had been transfigured before Peter, James, and John, he was met by a large crowd and a scene of tension. The remaining disciples were engaged in a dispute with the teachers of the law, and the atmosphere was charged with confusion and frustration. Seeing Jesus, the crowd ran to him in amazement, eager for his presence to bring clarity and resolution. A man stepped forward from the crowd, his face marked with desperation and sorrow. He fell at Jesus' feet and pleaded, "Teacher, I brought you my son, who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid." His description painted a heartbreaking picture of a child, tormented and helpless under the grip of a malevolent force. The man continued, explaining that he had asked Jesus' disciples to drive out the spirit, but they had been unable to do so. Jesus, hearing this, responded with a sigh of deep concern. "You unbelieving generation, how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me." As the boy was brought forward, the spirit reacted violently, throwing the child into a convulsion. He fell to the ground, rolling and foaming at the mouth. Jesus calmly asked the father how long this had been happening. "From childhood," the man replied. "It has often thrown him into fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us." Jesus' response was pointed and filled with encouragement. "If you can, everything is possible for one who believes." The father, in a moment of raw honesty, cried out, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." His words captured the mixture of faith and doubt that so often coexist in the human heart. Seeing that a crowd was rapidly gathering, Jesus acted decisively. He rebuked the unclean spirit. "You deaf and mute spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." The spirit shrieked, convulsed the boy violently, and then left. The boy lay still, so still that many thought he was dead. But Jesus took him by the hand, lifted him to his feet, and restored him to life and health. Later, when they were alone, the disciples asked Jesus why they had been unable to drive out the spirit. Jesus answered, "This kind can come out only by prayer." His words pointed to the deeper reality of spiritual warfare and the need for dependence on God, not merely technique or past successes. This miracle highlights several key truths. First, it underscores Jesus' absolute authority over evil. showing that no matter how entrenched or violent a force may be, his word is final and effective. Second, it reveals the essential role of faith, not as a perfect, unwavering force, but as a willingness to trust and seek God, even amid doubts and struggles. The Father's plea, "Help me overcome my unbelief," is a testament to the grace that meets us where we are, inviting us to deeper faith. Finally, the disciples' inability to cast out the demon served as a lesson in humility and dependence. Their failure reminded them and reminds us that spiritual victories are not achieved through human strength alone, but through prayerful reliance on God's power. The healing of the boy with an unclean spirit stands as a powerful reminder that faith, even when imperfect, opens the door to God's miraculous work. It calls every believer to seek deeper trust and to engage in prayer as the foundation for confronting the challenges and battles that arise on the journey of faith. When Jesus and his disciples arrived in Capernaum, the collectors of the temple tax approached Peter with a question: "Does your teacher pay the temple tax?" This tax, a half shekel per person, was required of all Jewish men to support the upkeep of the temple. Without hesitation, Peter replied, "Yes, he does," though it's clear that the encounter raised questions in his mind. When Peter entered the house where Jesus was staying, Jesus, knowing the situation before Peter even spoke, brought up the topic himself. He asked, "What do you think, Simon? From whom do the kings of the earth collect duty and taxes? From their own children or from others?" Peter answered, "From others." Jesus responded, "Then the children are exempt." Here, Jesus was making a significant point. As the Son of God, the true King, he was not obligated to pay the tax for his Father's house. Yet, rather than causing unnecessary offense or stirring up conflict over the issue, Jesus chose a gracious path. He said to Peter, "But so that we may not cause offense, go to the lake and throw out your line. Take the first fish you catch, open its mouth, and you will find a 4-drachma coin. Take it and give it to them for my tax and yours." Peter obeyed, and as promised, he caught a fish with a coin in its mouth, just enough to pay the tax for both himself and Jesus. This miracle, though small in scale compared to the grand healings and mass feedings, holds profound meaning. It demonstrates Jesus' sensitivity to social and religious customs, even when he was under no real obligation. His choice to pay the tax shows respect for established practices, while his method of providing for it reveals divine authority and provision. The way the miracle unfolded is equally significant. Jesus did not simply hand Peter a coin or summon wealth in a conventional way. Instead, he directed Peter to an act of faith, to cast a line and trust that provision would come in an unexpected form. The coin in the fish's mouth serves as a reminder that God's provision often arrives through surprising and creative means, precisely timed and perfectly sufficient. This event also underscores Jesus' knowledge and control over creation. His command linked the natural world with the needs of his followers, showing that nothing is beyond his reach or care. Whether in the grandeur of calming storms or in the quiet mystery of a coin found in a fish, Jesus revealed the same truth. God sees, provides, and acts with precision and purpose. The temple tax miracle reassures us that no need is too small for God's attention. It teaches that when we face obligations or challenges, even those that seem routine, we can trust in divine provision. God's care extends to every detail of life, often working through ordinary moments to deliver extraordinary results. A man was brought to Jesus who was suffering under the weight of multiple afflictions. He was possessed by a demon that had rendered him both blind and mute. His condition was a stark example of how spiritual oppression could manifest physically, cutting him off from the world in profound ways. Without sight or speech, he lived in isolation and silence, unable to express himself or fully engage with those around him. The people who brought the man to Jesus had likely heard of his power to heal and deliver, and their faith led them to seek help for someone who could not ask for it himself. Jesus, seeing the man's suffering, acted with quiet authority. He cast out the demon, and immediately the man's sight and speech were restored. The transformation was dramatic and undeniable. A man who had been locked in darkness and silence suddenly stood before them whole, seeing and speaking freely. The crowd's reaction was one of amazement. They were astonished at what they had witnessed, and they began to ask among themselves, "Could this be the Son of David?" Their question pointed to a growing awareness and hope that Jesus might indeed be the promised Messiah. Yet, as was often the case, this miracle did not only inspire faith and wonder, it also sparked controversy and skepticism, especially among the religious leaders who felt threatened by Jesus' growing influence. Though not detailed in this brief passage, their eventual response would be to accuse Jesus of casting out demons by the power of Beelzebul, the prince of demons, a claim that would lead to one of his most forceful teachings about the nature of his authority and the unforgivable sin of blaspheming the Holy Spirit. This miracle, though concise in its telling, highlights several key themes. It shows Jesus' unparalleled authority over spiritual forces, demonstrating that no oppression is too deep or complex for him to overcome. His power reaches into the darkest places of human existence, bringing light, freedom, and restoration. It also underscores the widening gap between the responses of ordinary people and the religious elite. While the crowds were increasingly open to recognizing Jesus as the Messiah, the religious leaders hardened their hearts, unable or unwilling to see the truth standing before them. The healing of the blind and mute demoniac reminds us that Jesus' mission was holistic, addressing both spiritual and physical needs. His miracles were not mere displays of power, but acts of mercy that restored dignity and wholeness to those who had been cast aside. Each healing pointed to the deeper truth of who he was, the one who came to set captives free, open blind eyes, and loose the tongues of the mute, fulfilling the promises spoken long before. One Sabbath day, as Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues, his eyes fell upon a woman in the congregation whose suffering had spanned nearly 2 decades. She was crippled by a spirit that had left her bent over, unable to straighten up at all. For 18 long years, she had lived in this state, her view of the world limited, her movements restricted, and her dignity undoubtedly eroded by years of physical and social hardship. Despite her condition, she had come to the synagogue, a sign of her perseverance and faith. Jesus saw her not as a disruption or an inconvenience, but as someone in need of compassion and healing. He called her forward, breaking through any social hesitations or unspoken barriers that may have kept her on the margins. When she came to him, Jesus spoke words filled with authority and grace. "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." Then he placed his hands on her, and immediately she straightened up, her body fully restored. Her response was instinctive and heartfelt. She praised God. The burden of 18 years lifted in an instant. The reaction of the synagogue leader, however, revealed a stark contrast. Instead of rejoicing at the miracle, he was indignant that Jesus had healed on the Sabbath. He addressed the crowd saying, "There are 6 days for work, so come and be healed on those days, not on the Sabbath." His words exposed a legalistic mindset that valued strict adherence to rules over the well-being of people. Jesus answered him directly, exposing the hypocrisy of such thinking. He said, "You hypocrites, doesn't each of you on the Sabbath untie your ox or donkey from the stall and lead it out to give it water? Then should not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has kept bound for 18 long years, be set free on the Sabbath day from what bound her?" His words cut through the pretense, reminding everyone that the heart of God's law is mercy and compassion, not rigid rule-keeping. The response of the crowd was telling. All his opponents were humiliated, while the people rejoiced at the wonderful things Jesus was doing. The miracle was not just about physical healing. It was a powerful statement about the true nature of God's kingdom. A kingdom where mercy triumphs over legalism, and where every act of compassion is a reflection of divine justice. This healing underscores Jesus' mission to restore not just bodies, but dignity and freedom. The woman, who had likely been overlooked and pitied for years, was now a living testimony to God's power and grace. Jesus' choice to heal her on the Sabbath highlighted his unwavering commitment to challenge the misinterpretations of the law that had turned what was meant to be a blessing into a burden. The story of the crippled woman serves as a lasting reminder that God's compassion is never constrained by human traditions or expectations. His desire is to bring wholeness, and his work always honors the deep worth of every individual. Through this miracle, Jesus showed that true worship of God involves acts of mercy, and that the Sabbath, far from being a day of restriction, is a day for freedom and restoration. One Sabbath, Jesus was invited to dine at the house of a prominent Pharisee, and many other guests were present. The atmosphere was tense and watchful. The religious leaders closely observed Jesus, waiting to see if he would once again challenge their interpretation of Sabbath laws. Among the guests was a man suffering from dropsy, a condition characterized by severe swelling, likely caused by fluid retention due to heart or kidney issues. His presence at the meal was unusual. Whether he was there by invitation or brought in to test Jesus is not stated, but his suffering was undeniable and visible to all. Jesus, aware of the scrutiny, did not shy away from addressing the situation. Before taking any action, he turned to the Pharisees and experts in the law and posed a pointed question: "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not?" His question went unanswered. Their silence revealed an internal conflict, trapped between their rigid legalism and the undeniable human need standing before them. Seeing their refusal to answer, Jesus acted decisively. He took hold of the man, healed him completely, and sent him on his way. The healing was simple, direct, and unmistakable, leaving no room for debate about the outcome. Jesus then confronted the leaders with a follow-up question that cut to the heart of their hypocrisy. "If one of you has a child or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath day, will you not immediately pull it out?" His words left them speechless. They had no reply, as his logic was both clear and irrefutable. This miracle, though brief in detail, carried significant weight. It highlighted the ongoing tension between Jesus and the religious authorities over the true purpose of the Sabbath. For Jesus, the Sabbath was a day for doing good, a day when acts of mercy and restoration were perfectly in line with God's intentions. For the Pharisees, however, the day had become entangled in a web of rules that often obscured compassion. The healing of the man with dropsy reinforced the message that God's laws are meant to promote life and wholeness, not to be wielded as barriers to grace. It showed that Jesus was not afraid to challenge empty religiosity, and that his priority was always the well-being and dignity of those in need. Through this act, Jesus once again demonstrated that true faith is lived out in love and mercy, not merely in legalistic observance. His healing of the man with dropsy stands as a testament to the heart of God, a heart that seeks to lift burdens, restore health, and bring freedom, even when doing so confronts the most entrenched traditions. As Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee, he entered a village where 10 men with leprosy stood at a distance. Bound by the law and custom of the time, these men could not approach others closely. Leprosy was a devastating disease, not only for its physical effects, but also for the deep social isolation it imposed. Those afflicted were cut off from family, community, and worship, living on the margins of society. Despite the distance, the men raised their voices in unison, crying out, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." Their plea was urgent and full of hope, directed toward the one they had heard could bring healing and restoration. Seeing them, Jesus did something remarkable. Instead of healing them immediately, he gave them a command: "Go, show yourselves to the priests." This directive aligned with the law of Moses, which required anyone healed of leprosy to be examined by the priests and declared clean before re-entering society. The 10 men obeyed, turning to go, even though their bodies still bore the marks of disease. Their act of obedience was a step of faith. They moved forward without yet seeing the evidence of their healing, and as they went, something miraculous happened. Along the way, their bodies were cleansed. The disease that had once marked them so visibly vanished, and they were made whole. One of them, upon realizing that he had been healed, turned back. Praising God with a loud voice, he made his way back to Jesus and fell at his feet, offering deep thanks. This man was a Samaritan, a detail full of meaning. Samaritans were often looked down upon by Jews, seen as outsiders and religiously impure. Yet here, it was the outsider who demonstrated true gratitude and reverence. Jesus, observing the scene, asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner?" His words underscored the absence of the others and highlighted the Samaritan's act of thanksgiving. Then Jesus said to him, "Rise and go. Your faith has made you well." While all 10 were physically healed, the Samaritan received something deeper, a blessing tied to his faith and his thankful heart. This miracle teaches profound lessons about gratitude and faith. The healing itself shows Jesus' power and willingness to restore those who are outcast and suffering, no matter their background or status, but the heart of the story lies in the response. 10 were healed, but only one recognized the deeper gift and returned to express thanks. The Samaritan's example serves as a reminder that gratitude is an essential part of faith. It is not enough to receive blessings. Recognizing and honoring the giver completes the circle of grace. His return to Jesus was more than an act of politeness. It was an acknowledgement of God's work in his life and a declaration of faith. The cleansing of the 10 lepers stands as a powerful call to remember the source of our blessings. It reminds us that God's mercy reaches far and wide, crossing social and cultural boundaries, and that a heart of gratitude not only honors God, but also deepens our own experience of his grace. In the village of Bethany, a crisis unfolded. Lazarus, a dear friend of Jesus and the brother of Mary and Martha, fell gravely ill. The sisters, knowing Jesus' power and love for their family, sent word to him, "Lord, the one you love is sick." Their message was simple, yet full of faith, trusting that Jesus would respond quickly to help. When Jesus received the news, he made a surprising declaration: "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Yet instead of going immediately to Bethany, he remained where he was for 2 more days. This delay seemed puzzling, especially to those who knew how close Jesus was to Lazarus and his sisters. After 2 days, Jesus told his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." The disciples hesitated, reminding him of the danger, as some in Judea had recently sought to stone him. But Jesus was resolute. He told them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up." The disciples misunderstood, thinking Lazarus was resting naturally, so Jesus clarified, "Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." When Jesus arrived in Bethany, Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Many Jews had come to comfort Mary and Martha, and the air was heavy with mourning. Martha went out to meet Jesus and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus replied, "Your brother will rise again." Martha affirmed her belief in the resurrection at the last day, but Jesus spoke words that shifted everything. "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" Martha answered with faith, "Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." Mary soon joined them, falling at Jesus' feet, weeping and echoing her sister's words, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Moved deeply by her grief and by the sorrow of the gathered mourners, Jesus was troubled in spirit. He asked, "Where have you laid him?" As they led him to the tomb, Jesus wept, the shortest verse in Scripture, but one that reveals the depth of his compassion and shared sorrow. Arriving at the tomb, Jesus ordered, "Take away the stone." Martha, ever practical, hesitated. "But Lord, by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days." Jesus reminded her, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" The stone was rolled away. Jesus looked up and prayed, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." Then with a loud voice he called out, "Lazarus, come out!" And Lazarus did. Bound hand and foot with burial cloths, his face wrapped in a cloth, he stepped out of the tomb, alive. Jesus commanded, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." This miracle is one of the most profound and pivotal in Jesus' ministry. It revealed his absolute authority over life and death and served as a powerful sign pointing to his own forthcoming resurrection. For the crowd, it was undeniable evidence of his divine power, and many believed in him because of what they had seen. The raising of Lazarus also highlighted the deep personal relationship Jesus had with those he loved. His tears at the tomb showed that divine power is not detached from human pain. Jesus entered fully into the sorrow of those mourning, even though he knew he would soon reverse their grief. This event stands as a beacon of hope for all who face death and loss. Jesus' words, "I am the resurrection and the life," echo across time, offering the assurance that his victory over death is not just for Lazarus, but for all who believe in him. The raising of Lazarus reminds us that even when all seems lost, Jesus holds the power to bring life out of death, hope out of despair, and joy out of mourning. As Jesus and his disciples were leaving Jericho, a sizable crowd followed them, eager to witness more of his teachings and miraculous works. By the roadside sat a blind man named Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, reduced to begging to survive. His blindness had left him dependent on the mercy of passers-by, and his days were marked by isolation and hardship. Yet Bartimaeus was not content to remain silent when hope drew near. Hearing that Jesus of Nazareth was passing by, he began to shout with a voice that cut through the noise of the crowd, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." His cry was bold and full of faith, recognizing Jesus as the promised Messiah, a title rich with meaning and expectation. Many in the crowd tried to silence him, rebuking him and telling him to be quiet, but Bartimaeus would not be deterred. He shouted all the more, refusing to let the opportunity pass him by. His persistence and determination revealed a deep well of faith that would not be easily shaken. Jesus heard his cries and stopped. He called for Bartimaeus to be brought to him. The tone of the crowd shifted quickly as they said to him, "Cheer up on your feet, he's calling you." Throwing his cloak aside, Bartimaeus sprang to his feet and made his way to Jesus with urgency and hope. When Bartimaeus stood before him, Jesus asked, "What do you want me to do for you?" It was a question that invited Bartimaeus to voice his deepest desire. Without hesitation, he replied, "Rabbi, I want to see." His request was simple yet profound, a longing for restoration and the fullness of life. Jesus said to him, "Go, your faith has healed you." Immediately Bartimaeus received his sight. The darkness that had defined his world lifted in an instant, but his healing was not the end of his story. Mark's account tells us that Bartimaeus followed Jesus along the road, joining the journey of discipleship with his new vision and renewed life. This miracle highlights the power of bold, persistent faith. Bartimaeus was not concerned with social conventions or the disapproval of the crowd. He knew what he needed and believed Jesus was the one who could provide it. His willingness to cry out, even louder when faced with opposition, stands as a testament to the kind of faith that Jesus honors. The healing also reveals Jesus' attentiveness to individuals amid the masses. Despite being surrounded by a large crowd, he stopped for one man's cry, showing that no voice is too small or too insignificant to reach his ears. Bartimaeus' story reminds us that faith requires both belief and action. He called out in faith, came forward when called, and expressed his need plainly. In return, he received not only physical sight, but also the opportunity to follow Jesus with eyes wide open to the path ahead. This miracle speaks to all who feel overlooked or silenced by the noise of the world. It reassures us that Jesus sees, hears, and responds to those who seek him with sincere hearts. Bartimaeus' boldness and Jesus' compassionate response together form a powerful picture of faith meeting grace, bringing transformation and new beginnings. As Jesus and his disciples were traveling from Bethany to Jerusalem, an event unfolded that carried deep symbolic weight. Early in the morning, Jesus was hungry. In the distance, he saw a fig tree in leaf and approached it, hoping to find something to eat. But when he reached it, he found nothing but leaves, no figs, no fruit. Then Jesus did something that surprised his disciples. He said to the tree, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." His words were a clear and forceful pronouncement, and though nothing appeared to happen immediately, the act left a strong impression. The next day, as they were passing by again, the disciples noticed the fig tree had withered from the roots. Peter, remembering what had happened, exclaimed, "Rabbi, look, the fig tree you cursed has withered." This miracle stands apart from others in its nature. Unlike the healings and restorations that brought life and wholeness, this act was one of judgment. But it was not merely about the tree, it carried a deeper spiritual message. The fig tree, often used in Scripture as a symbol of Israel, represented a nation that outwardly appeared full of life and promise, like the tree's lush leaves, but lacked the true fruit of righteousness and faith. By withering the fig tree, Jesus offered a stark warning against hollow religiosity, outward displays of piety that do not bear the genuine fruit of godly living. It was a visual parable, a sign that God desires more than appearances. He seeks true spiritual fruitfulness. After Peter pointed out the withered tree, Jesus used the moment to teach about faith and prayer. He said, "Have faith in God. Truly I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, 'Go, throw yourself into the sea,' and does not doubt in their heart, but believes that what they say will happen, it will be done for them. Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours." Jesus' teaching expanded the lesson, showing that fruitfulness is not only a matter of outward results, but is deeply connected to the vitality of faith. He underscored the power of prayer and the necessity of forgiveness, saying, "And when you stand praying, if you hold anything against anyone, forgive them, so that your Father in heaven may forgive you your sins." This moment at the fig tree, both the act and the explanation, highlights the interconnectedness of faith, fruitfulness, and the heart's condition. It teaches that true spiritual life is marked by trust in God, a readiness to pray boldly, and a heart free from bitterness and unforgiveness. The withering of the fig tree serves as a sober reminder that appearances are not enough. God looks for the fruit of righteousness, love, mercy, and faith, and for those who walk with him in true faith, the promise is clear. Mountains can be moved, and prayers offered in faith will bear fruit in ways both seen and unseen. The night was tense and charged with impending danger. Jesus and his disciples were in the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus had been praying, fully aware that his betrayal was near. The quiet of the night was suddenly shattered as a crowd arrived, armed with swords and clubs, sent by the chief priests and elders. Among them was Judas, who stepped forward to identify Jesus with a kiss. As the soldiers moved to arrest Jesus, his disciples reacted with a burst of fear and aggression. One of them, identified in John's Gospel as Peter, drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus, and in the chaos of the moment, his injury symbolized the eruption of violence and confusion. Jesus, witnessing this act, immediately intervened. He rebuked the violence with calm authority, saying, "No more of this." His words echoed his earlier teachings about peace and love, even for enemies. Then, in an extraordinary act of mercy, Jesus touched the servant's ear and healed him. This miracle, though brief and occurring amid a flurry of events, is striking for several reasons. First, it happened during Jesus' arrest, an intense and deeply personal moment of betrayal and suffering. Yet even as he was being seized, Jesus' concern extended beyond himself. His instinct was to heal, to restore, to bring wholeness where there was pain. Second, the healing of Malchus' ear stands as a profound statement about the nature of Jesus' mission. He had taught that his kingdom was not of this world, and that those who live by the sword will die by the sword. By healing the servant, he demonstrated that his way was not one of retaliation or force, but of mercy and peace, even in the face of injustice. This miracle also served as a final display of his divine power before his passion began. Those arresting him saw firsthand that he could heal with a simple touch, yet he willingly submitted to their grasp, making it clear that he was laying down his life by choice, not because he lacked the power to resist. The healing of Malchus' ear is a vivid reminder that mercy is at the heart of Jesus' character. In a moment when vengeance or resistance might have seemed justified, he chose compassion. His last miracle before the crucifixion was not a grand spectacle but a quiet act of restoration, showing that his love and grace remained unchanged, even as the path to the cross unfolded. This event also invites reflection on the power of peace in moments of conflict. Jesus' act of healing broke the cycle of violence and left an indelible mark on all who witnessed it. A testament that true strength is found not in striking back, but in offering healing even to those who come against us. After the agony of the crucifixion, the darkness of the tomb seemed final. Jesus' body had been laid to rest, sealed within a stone tomb, and his followers were left scattered and grieving, their hopes seemingly crushed. Yet even in that silence, God's plan was unfolding, a plan that would culminate in the most transformative event in history. On the first day of the week, just as dawn was breaking, women who had followed Jesus went to the tomb to anoint his body with spices. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome. As they approached, they wondered how they would roll away the heavy stone that sealed the entrance. But upon arrival, they discovered that the stone had already been moved. Inside the tomb, they encountered something wholly unexpected. An angel, radiant and fearsome, declared, "Do not be afraid, for I know you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen, just as he said." The empty tomb, once a symbol of death, now stood as a powerful testimony to victory and life. The women, filled with a mixture of fear and great joy, ran to tell the disciples. Along the way, Jesus himself appeared to them, greeting them and confirming the truth of what they had heard. They fell at his feet, worshipping him, overwhelmed by the reality of his presence. Meanwhile, Peter and John, hearing the women's report, raced to the tomb. John arrived first, but did not enter. Peter, bold as ever, stepped inside and saw the linen strips lying there, the cloth that had covered Jesus' head neatly folded. Though they did not yet fully understand the magnitude of what had happened, the empty tomb spoke volumes. Throughout that day and the days that followed, Jesus appeared to his followers in various places, dispelling their doubts and fears. He met Mary Magdalene in the garden, speaking her name in a way that opened her eyes to his risen presence. He walked alongside two disciples on the road to Emmaus, explaining the scriptures and breaking bread with them, their hearts burning within them as they recognized him. He appeared to the gathered disciples, offering peace and showing them his wounds as proof of his identity. One of the most poignant encounters came with Thomas, who struggled to believe without seeing. When Jesus appeared and invited him to touch his hands and side, Thomas responded with a declaration of faith, "My Lord and my God." Jesus affirmed his belief, but also offered a blessing for all who would come to faith without seeing, a promise that extends across time to all who believe today. The resurrection was not merely the reversal of death, it was the inauguration of a new reality. Jesus had conquered sin and the grave, fulfilling his promise and opening the way for eternal life. His victory redefined everything, transforming despair into hope, defeat into triumph, and sorrow into joy. Before ascending to the Father, Jesus gave his disciples the Great Commission, instructing them to go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing and teaching in his name. He assured them of his continual presence, "And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age." The resurrection stands as the foundation of Christian faith. It affirms that Jesus is who he claimed to be, the Son of God, the Savior of the world. It offers assurance that death does not have the final word and that all who believe in him will share in his victory. This ultimate miracle forever altered the course of history. It ignited a movement that spread across the world, fueled by the message that Jesus lives and reigns. The resurrection is not just an event of the past, it is a present and living reality, the source of hope, strength, and new life for all who trust in him. Through the empty tomb, Jesus declared once and for all that no darkness is too great, no grave too deep, and no situation too hopeless. His resurrection remains the ultimate sign of God's power, love, and faithfulness, a miracle that continues to change lives and bring light to the world. Sometime after the resurrection, the disciples found themselves back at the Sea of Galilee, a familiar place, but one now charged with new meaning. Peter, perhaps seeking comfort in the routine, said to the others, "I'm going out to fish." 6 of the disciples joined him, Thomas, Nathanael, James, John, and 2 others. They set out in their boat and fished through the night, but despite their efforts, they caught nothing. As dawn began to break, a figure stood on the shore, though they did not recognize who it was. The voice carried across the water, "Friends, haven't you any fish?" When they answered no, the man instructed them, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some." The disciples obeyed, casting their net once more. Suddenly the net was teeming with fish, so full that they could not haul it in. At that moment John, the disciple whom Jesus loved, turned to Peter and said, "It is the Lord." Those simple words stirred Peter's heart. Without hesitation, he wrapped his outer garment around himself and jumped into the water, eager to reach Jesus ahead of the others. The rest of the disciples followed in the boat, towing the overflowing net. When they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals with fish on it and some bread. Jesus invited them, "Bring some of the fish you have just caught." Peter, always eager, climbed aboard and dragged the net ashore. It was filled with 153 large fish, and remarkably, despite the number, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." None of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Jesus took the bread and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was the 3rd time Jesus appeared to his disciples after being raised from the dead. This miraculous catch mirrored the earlier event that had marked the calling of Peter, James, and John. But now, after the resurrection, its meaning deepened. It was a confirmation that Jesus was still present with them, guiding their efforts, and it served as a powerful reminder of their calling. To be fishers of men, casting the net of the gospel wide and trusting in his provision. The precise number of fish, 153, though much discussed, underlines the abundance and specificity of God's blessing. The unbroken net, even under the strain of the large catch, symbolized the strength and unity of the mission they were to continue. The setting of this miracle around a shared meal also highlighted Jesus' desire for fellowship and restoration. The breakfast by the sea was not only a moment of nourishment, but also a time of deep reassurance. Jesus, the risen Lord, was not distant or removed. He met his followers in their familiar spaces, providing for them and renewing their purpose. This final recorded miracle in John's Gospel affirms that Jesus' power and presence did not end at the resurrection. He continued to lead, provide, and commission his disciples. For Peter and the others, it was a personal and vivid reminder that their mission was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The miraculous catch of fish post-resurrection assures all believers that Jesus remains active and present, guiding his followers even when their efforts seem fruitless. It is a testament to his ongoing provision, his care in both the mundane and the miraculous, and his faithful commitment to the mission he entrusts to his people. We have journeyed together through the incredible and awe-inspiring miracles of Jesus, witnessing his unmatched power, his deep compassion, and his unwavering mission to bring healing, restoration, and life. Each miracle not only demonstrated his divine authority, but also revealed his heart for humanity, reaching out to individuals from every walk of life, in every kind of need. These stories continue to resonate today, reminding us that Jesus' love and power are timeless. Whether calming storms, opening blind eyes, or raising the dead, he showed that no situation is beyond hope and no life is beyond transformation. His miracles were and remain signs pointing to a greater reality, that in him true life is found. If this video has inspired or touched you in any way, I invite you to be part of spreading this message further. Please subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any future content. Don't forget to like the video, as it helps more people discover these powerful stories. I'd love to hear your thoughts, reflections, or personal testimonies in the comments below. Your voice matters. And finally, share this video with your friends, family, and anyone who might need encouragement today. Thank you for watching, and may you continue to walk in faith, hope, and the assurance of God's love and power.